Decline of European colonialism. Yay, woohoo! By Isabelle, Dain, and Kupono. Scramble for Africa. The early 1800s. A man, Otto von Bismarck, suggested that the Western powers gather together and split up Africa. So the 14 Western powers gathered: Italy, France, Spain, and Russia, but Africa wasn't invited. So, Africa was colonized by certain countries, but Portugal was the first. The get-together of these 14 countries was the Berlin Conference. Apartheid, 1948 to 1991. Apartheid was the discrimination of South Africans. This image here represents how the whites had more power over the natives. The white Europeans wanted to have the most control and power over the natives. Now, Nelson Mandela, born July 18, 1918, died December 5, 2013. He grew up in the apartheid time. He had been a revolutionary against it and became president of South Africa in 1994 to 1999. It always seems impossible until it's done. Colonization of India. 18th century. India said, we have all these textiles and spices. Then the Europeans came along and said, we want textiles and spices. Portugal first again, then the Dutch, then the British. The British controlled textiles, the Dutch controlled spices. The East India Company grew.
India's independence. The Sepoy Rebellion, 1857 to 1858. The Sepoy Rebellion started when a man named Mangal Pandey attacked a British officer and was put in jail and then sentenced to death. This inspired others to fight for him and stand up against the British. World War I. Britain promises India's freedom. This is Gandhi. He took control of the Indian National Congress and was a major political and spiritual figure for Indian independence. During World War I, India was offered the freedom. Gandhi supported it. However, when the war ended, Britain refused to give them independence. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. The Salt March, March 12, 1930. The British law claimed that they had the right to sell and produce salt in India. The people and Gandhi didn't like this. He wrote to Viceroy saying that he would change the law. Gandhi walked 240 miles with thousands of followers as a peaceful rebellion. They harvested salts, and then they were all arrested. This embarrassed Britain, who wanted their democratic ways to be perfect. Muhammad Ali. He was born December 25th, 1879, and grew up and became a middle-class lawyer. He began to support Hindu-Muslim unity idea in India. He proposed the Lucknow Pact, which gave India more independence. However, this pact was later split up by Gandhi. This split up the Hindu people and they became more dominant than the Muslims. Muhammad began to push this idea away and wanted to create their own country named Pakistan. And so came the partition of India in 1947. And finally, this year, Britain granted India their freedom. Since there's a long-lasting feud between the Hindus and the Muslims, it was decided to partition India and split it. Muhammad agreed to this. However, Gandhi believed that the country should be united, not divided. However, Gandhi was overruled, and so they created a West and the East Pakistan, separated by India in the middle. Gandhi was not happy about this division because everyone, he thought, should be united. This great divide caused the Great Migration, where thousands of people trying to get to their correct country with their correct group of people were killed through the chaos of the movement. Gandhi became a victim when he was killed by a Hindu nationalist. And all of this chaos and everything, the killings and the murders, came from the Mountbatten Plan. As mentioned before, the Hindus and the Muslims had a long-lasting feud, and so the partition was to help them keep peace by dividing up the Muslims into certain countries and the Hindus into certain countries. However, not all of the areas in India were decided. There still lay a question mark on whose country owned certain states like Kashmir. So this brought into Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who had absolutely no idea what he was doing. And so he decided to create the Line of Radcliffe, which divided up Kashmir. 2/3 went to India and 1/3 went to Pakistan. Kashmir was a huge, huge asset because it had water, and the whole rest of India is desert. So water is kind of important because it's the thing that makes you live, maybe, something like that. And so there became this huge conflict with wars and everything over Kashmir because, water, people. And literally in the same year that India gained its independence, 1947, they began to fight. Pakistan and India went to war over Kashmir because, again, water, people. And that was the first of many wars to come. Finally, eventually, the United Nations had to step in and stop the war and establish the line of control, which gave India more of Kashmir, and they came out on top of the war. European imperialism in China. The first Europeans to establish there were the Portuguese, again. China had silk and porcelains. The Europeans wanted these things. However, in return, China only wanted gold and silver. Guangzhou was the first port the Chinese allowed. However, China was more reserved and wanted total control over their trading with the Europeans. However, by the 19th century, these restrictions began to fail. The merchants believed that they could buy anything anytime, and they also began to buy the supplies in opium instead of the required silver and gold. And so the Opium Wars began. They started when the Chinese officials were very, very alarmed and scared of the amount of drugs from the opium. And so in 1839, Chinese officers burned a opium storehouse in southern China. The merchants were furious at this, and they called the British to come and help in their defense. The British did, and so the Chinese were put down. The Europeans had superior weapons and skills, in addition to the Navy and Marines that the Chinese did not have. In 1842, the Treaty of Nanking was made. The Chinese government knew that if they continued the war against Britain, nothing would end well. And so, the Treaty of Nanking was made, and here are the results. China paid indemnity to Great Britain for causing the war, similar to how Germany did it for World War II. The emperors of the Chinese government agreed to lease an area of Hong Kong to Great Britain. The Chinese promised to limit the taxation of any goods leaving their country to 5%, and the extraterritorial right to live under the British's own laws and be tried by their own court, and so the British court would favor the British, and they could basically get away with anything they wanted. However, the European merchants working in China weren't satisfied, and they wanted more. And so the Boxer Group formed. However, Britain came out on top. This is Sun Yat-sen, who was the leader of the KMT, the Nationalist Party of China. Sun's successor was Chiang Kai-shek. Mao Zedong was the leader of the Communist Party of China. And this is what China looked like. The Great Leap Forward, 1958.